Hello, and welcome to the IT Project Management course. Today's video is on the second to last phase of our hybrid project management approach. This is the controlling phase. This can also be known as the monitoring and controlling phase, and this is less of a concrete section of time and more of a process that happens throughout the project life cycle. It can be argued that this phase is kind of the latter portion of the executing phase, or occurs in conjunction with the executing phase. For the purposes of our hybrid project management model, we will simplify and say that this phase occurs as the work for the executing phase is being completed. In this video, we're going to start out by defining the controlling phase. Next, we will talk about one of the key concepts in this phase, the iron triangle, also known as the triple constraint or project manager's conundrum. And this does a good job of highlighting how tricky this phase is while giving a holistic view of project management. Last, we'll wrap up by covering some of the common issues a project manager might face while controlling a project. Before we dive in, let's review our hybrid project management model. The controlling phase is fed completed work in the form of finished user stories from the executing phase. These completed stories are validated in the controlling phase and passed into the closing phase for deployment and/or implementation of that completed work. Incorporating our agile project management components, the user stories are cycled through the Scrum Sprint process until completed and fed into validation. Depending on the organization, validation can be completed in a separate testing sprint as a part of the development sprint, or in a waterfall fashion after the work has been completed in the Scrum Sprint. Any of the three approaches can work, but for this course, we're going to be assuming that the validation occurs as a part of the Scrum Sprint, as the last step before the completed work is passed on to be implemented in the closing phase. The Project Management Institute has a poignant snippet clarifying what the controlling phase is all about: taking corrective action when necessary. Now, this specific article goes on to discuss the monitoring process as a part of this phase that enables the corrective action. But the corrective action is really the core of the controlling phase. Knowing when to take corrective action as well as what action to take is one of the most difficult parts of being a project manager and can make or break projects in some cases. There are standard procedures in the project management realm that significantly improve success of the actions taken while in this controlling phase. The procedures are commonly referred to as validation or quality control. Often, individuals will use the term testing in this place. Now, that's a little bit misleading, as testing is typically a subset of validation or quality control. However, it does point to the importance of testing within the processes of validation. Testing also comes in a variety of flavors. For simplification, we're going to group them into two broad categories of bug testing and user acceptance testing, and we're going to talk more about those in just a moment. While validation refers to ensuring that the quality of work is being completed, there are other components of the project that project managers will also need to monitor and control. We've discussed the introduction to the controlling phase and how it fits in the model, as well as covered a little bit of validation. Now let's talk about the variables that we're controlling and trying to adjust to achieve success in the project. There are a few variations of the model that we will be discussing today, and you have probably seen a similar model, maybe with different labels, already. This concept is referred to as several different names as well. Some names include the iron triangle, triple constraint, project triangle, or the flexibility matrix. All of the models and their various names and components are trying to capture the same thing: the idea that when you adjust a piece of work within the project, it affects other components in a positive or negative relationship. Let's start with the diagram on the left as an example, and this is titled the triple constraint. In this diagram, the relationship between time, cost, and scope are highlighted. Time refers to the length of the project or a portion of the project. Cost refers to the real dollars, the cost of the work, including salary, opportunity cost, and more. Scope is simply what is included in the project. So to increase the scope of the project, the cost and or time of the project will need to increase. To finish the project faster, the cost will need to increase and or the scope will need to decrease. To reduce the cost of the project, the scope will need to decrease or the time of the project will need to increase. Often, project managers will need to take actions to adjust all three variables simultaneously. In our second diagram, scope is in the center, and it's comprised of the variables of cost, quality, and time. This diagram refers to the concept as the iron triangle. Similar to the previous model, to increase the quality, additional time, and greater costs are needed. To reduce time for the project, the cost can increase and or the quality can decrease. To reduce the cost of the project, the time can be increased and or the quality can be decreased. Now that's a lot to take in, but really the theme of both diagrams is that the interrelated parts of the project and the relationship between those parts change as the project changes throughout the duration. With the concept of the triple constraint or the iron triangle covered, we can now discuss common problems that arise from the interactions of the variables within a project. Scope creep is our first issue for discussion, and it's one of the more dangerous and ubiquitous issues that face project managers. Scope creep refers to the habit of increasing what is included in the project over time. As work is beginning to be planned, new ideas from stakeholders or the oversight team or the project team often arise. Some of these ideas are certainly valid and should be included in the project through a process called a change request. Many times, too many of these ideas are incorporated despite not being directly additive to the project goal. The project then becomes bloated and unfeasible and often fails. Change requests are simply a formal way of tracking modifications to what is included in the project. With our hybrid project management model, we can accommodate for these changes within the backlog refinement and sprint planning meetings. The cyclical nature of the Scrum sprint and the flexibility that Agile project management provides can drastically reduce scope creep. Another common issue facing projects starts early in the project when gathering requirements. This can come in the form of too few requirements gathered, not enough detail on each requirement, or incorrect requirement specifications. Regardless of the form, the issue is simply that the work being completed is not accurate to address the goal of the project, or cannot be completed because the requirements to address the goal are simply not known. Validation and quality control include several topics and techniques, but common items include bug testing and user acceptance testing. Quality control refers to the processes in place in order to ensure the products work as intended and without issue. Bug testing, for example, includes testing techniques like smoke testing, regression testing, black box testing, and more. The specifics of each technique are outside the scope of this course, but they essentially ensure that the program or IT product doesn't have any issues that cause it to break or behave in an unintended way. Another concept that is important to the controlling phase is user acceptance testing. This refers to the process of ensuring that the individuals using the IT product or software program can complete the tasks that the focus of the project enables them to do. This type of validation leads into an entirely different domain of IT altogether. User experience or user interface design is typically what that is called. Overall, you can think of validation as a sign-off on the work completed, that it functions properly and achieves what it's set out to do. Now that we have covered the controlling phase, the triple constraint, and common issues in controlling projects, we can move on to the implementing phase. As we have ensured our work is sufficient in the controlling phase, we can discuss implementing that work, communicating the changes, and reflecting on the project as a whole after it is complete. We will cover all of that and more in our next video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.